So there's just kind of
Right, tell me to get started.
Sit up straight then. It's not the chair.
Yeah.
totally.
Yes, we're ready. Okay. All right, we're gonna go ahead and call this work session to order. Tonight, we have Erin Gonzalez-Randles and Amy Green here to give us a presentation on our special education program. And yesterday, the board was lucky enough to get to go on a field trip to go to the high school and the middle school and Independence Academy. We also got to visit the print shop here at the district office. And it was just such an incredible experience. I loved being able to go into those different environments and to see all the different opportunities that you guys are providing our special education students to learn where they're meeting their goals and you're meeting where they're at learning wise. So that was really special for me. I'm sure the other board members who attended would say the same thing. It was a really amazing experience. And so I'm really proud of the work that you guys are doing here. We're excited that you guys are here tonight to share it with everybody at home. So what?
Thank you so much. We are excited, Board of Directors, to have the opportunity to share with you just a little bit about special education in general, and then really some specific information about how we approach special education in Sherwood, kind of our philosophy and vision for special education, as well as just some detailed information about what we do in our program. We'll just jump right in. So the Student Services Department is something that most people have probably heard of, but I'd like to just provide a little bit of information about what it is that we do. So one of our pockets of work in the Student Services Department is to support special education for Sherwood, obviously. We also support Section 504, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act and its implementation in the school setting. And that's similar to special education, but also has some key differences where we don't provide that specially designed instruction or separate instruction from the core instruction that students receive. We also support and manage the behavior and mental health department and services in our school district. And we also manage and support the health services department, which includes several nurses and health assistants that support students in the district.
So this picture might look familiar to you, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about our kind of core student services support team. You can see I'm going to start in the top row. First, you see on the left, Peggy Harbeck, who is our data and support specialist. Peggy really focuses on everything to do with compliance. And in our line of work, there is a lot of reporting to the state. There is a lot of attention to if we're meeting outlined criteria by the state and the federal government, and Peggy runs all of that for us. She also really helps with our budgeting and keeping track of our paperwork as we go through the year. We couldn't do it without her. You see myself, I'm our associate director, and I really help Erin try to do her job. I'm just kidding. She doesn't need my help, but we do team together. I support our school psychologists and speech and language pathologists along with Erin, really focus on curriculum and instruction, and then do some direct building support for our high school, our charter school, and our Independence Academy, which you were able to see, as well as our private schools within our district. Then you see Jessica Listman. Jessica is one of our special education coordinators. Jessica is in buildings all day across the district. She also helps support our assistive technology. Many of our students need devices or materials that are not something that is in every classroom in order to access their education, and she helps coordinate those services. She also is helping with our adoptions for our curriculum that we discussed last spring that we are bringing on board this year, and she supports all of our skill centers. Those are our separate programs or our segregated classrooms that we have at the elementary, middle, and high school level that we were able to see one of yesterday. And then we also have there Erin. Erin, as you see, is really just person who guides us where we're going. She's in charge of all of our human resources, health services, oversees the nurses. I'm sure you can speak to this in more detail here. Like, she's also the district section 504 coordinator. So if there's anyone across the district who has a question about that, or a parent who has a concern, that goes to her. She supports and leads our behavioral and mental health teams. She also leads our human resources, concerns, or questions. That is a large part of what we do day to day as well. She also oversees our district SPR and I, which is our compliance processes with the state. We'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit, not in too much detail, I promise. On the bottom row, you can see we have Chelsea Vukovic, and she is our district mental health and behavior coordinator. Chelsea really oversees our behavior consultation at the secondary level. So that's the middle and high school. She oversees our behavioral safety assessments. She has presented to the board about that process previously, and she coordinates that for all levels throughout the district. She also does for our department what's called restraint and seclusion reporting. So anytime a student requires any protective physical intervention, there's a significant process for us to review why that happened and report to the state, and she helps our teams do that as well. She also helps coordinate our social emotional learning systems throughout the district, really making sure that we're focused on those key criteria that our students need to access. And then she also oversees our wellness room IAs and supports our counselors and health specialists. She wears so many hats, and we're very, very thankful for all of our support that she provides us. In the middle, you can see Leah Breschwein. She is another special education coordinator and does direct building support to 3 of our elementary schools, meaning she's there to support their special education implementation and referral process, similarly to Jessica and myself. She also is our behavior specialist, so meaning she does that behavior consultation for the whole elementary level. Whenever a team, an administrator, a teacher, or a team of professionals has a concern about behavior, there's a process for them to reach out to her and get support. And then last but very much not least is Angela, our administrative assistant. Angela helps us run our lives. She manages our calendars, schedules. She also coordinates all of our tracking for many of our systems, such as recovery services for extended school year. She helps us with purchasing, website management, and everything. So that is our primary team. If you see them around, they're all extraordinarily knowledgeable people. And we'd love to say hi. And they all have wished they were able to meet everyone.
Great, so last year, it actually began, I guess, 2 school years ago. We started to do some visioning work with our stakeholders, like our parents and our student community, as well as our staff members. And we were trying to develop some core values as a team that we could really center our work around and really agree upon so that we can serve our students best we can. Those values guide all areas of the student services department, but you'll see that there are themes in here that definitely apply to our students with disabilities. So our first value is that we seek to foster independence in all students. There's a lot of research to support that focusing on building independence in each area of life or each area of school leads to positive outcomes for students or individuals with disabilities. And so that is one of our the wonderful things that we get to see our students as they graduate and as they transition out of our programs. We get to see that level of independence. And if we start early, we're just going to do a better job of supporting our students in that way. The next one is we believe that all students have the ability to learn and that learning occurs best in community. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about what inclusion means, what least restrictive environment means, and those are really key terms in the world of special education. Again, there's a lot of research to support these practices, inclusionary practices in schools, but not only that, but the law requires it in some, circumstances. So it's good for culture, it's good for student outcomes, both for students with disabilities, but also for students who don't have disabilities. There's a lot of positive research in that regard as well. Our third value is that we seek to ensure access by removing barriers. including those in environment, beliefs, and mindset. And that's a lot of what we do. I think in our department is we're problem solvers. We like to jump in and support people. In schools, we encounter numerous barriers throughout every single day. And that's something that we really try and do our best to support our programs and buildings. And that's a value that our special educators have adopted as well. Is how can we remove the barriers and make this environment or this activity accessible? And we've really benefited from having strong parent partners too, who have helped us to have those conversations and helped our own learning so that we can, continuously improve in this area.
All right, so we talked about our 4 main areas of focus, but really we're going to jump into some details about special education. The language of special education, as in any industry, there are a lot of detailed words and nomenclature that get turned into acronyms. So these are some of the most common ones that you will hear. I think some came up in our conversations yesterday. When you hear the term FAPE, what we're talking about is a free and appropriate public education. Erin, in a moment, will go into detail about what that means. IEP is an individualized education plan. And really, that's the name of the whole plan that a team creates to support a student's unique needs. One part of that plan is called the PLAF or PLEF, depending on when you started in the industry. And really, that is that data connected to the present levels of academic and functional performance for a student. Functional performance, meaning those non-academic educational needs, such as communication and behavior. Specially designed instruction are those materials and methods that we use to meet a specific goal that a team creates for a student. Something that's taught that's not necessarily taught in the same way that every other student might receive it in the classroom. NPJ, non-participation justification, is really a conversation that the team needs to have to document why would we ever remove a student from their general education classroom. Like Erin said, least restrictive environment, or LRE, is one of those legal obligations and moral obligations that we have, and we talk about that throughout that whole plan and justify it when we're talking about non-participation or removing a student. Accommodations and modifications are those changes that we make to the environment or the curriculum to support a student's unique needs. And those, as well as the non-participation and specific services, drive the placement, the where that the student is receiving their education. There are many more, but we'll just start.
Hundreds, if you're ever interested.
And if we speak in another language, as in any other environment, stop us and say, what are you?
We really try and do our best in meetings and when we're talking to parents to not use our acronyms, but sometimes they slip out because that's our language in special ed. So one of the terms that Amy highlighted was free and appropriate public education. And if we had kind of like the holy grail of all of special ed, like what is that foundational piece of special education, it would be FAPE. And the main law from the federal government that was, it began implementation like in the 70s, but really was renamed to be the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. That happened in the 90s. And so we see iterations of that and adjustments of that, but that's still in place today. And that's the big law, the federal law that we implement special education under. One of the primary tenets of IDEA is free and appropriate public education. So what that means is that every student who is eligible for special education, we must, as a school district, design a program that meets that child's individual needs. And it has to be tailored to that student so that every student in our school system receives educational benefit. And so educational benefit, if you go further into the law, is measured by a student's educational progress. That can look like educational progress in the general education curriculum, or it can look like educational progress in within that student's specific goals that the team has set together. That diagram there talks about the FAPE continuum. And there's a process of identification of students, referral of students for special education, and it's a really thorough process that looks at a lot of data. And then we develop those present levels, or the PLAF or PLEP that Amy was talking about, that is data rich and really highlights the needs of the student. From that, we develop measurable goals, and this is all done in a team that is a partnership between parents, special education teachers, and other school district personnel who know that student and are experts in that student or in that placement or in other district services. After that, we talk about what the services are going to look like within that team, and we always place students in the least restrictive environment. In the least restrictive environment, we'll talk about a little bit more. It differs for every student, but generally we're called to place students in general education unless there is a substantial need to pull students out.
So once the team comes together and determines our offer or a plan for a free and appropriate public education, we're also required to make sure that we're on the right track. And we do this by careful analysis of multiple factors, as well as adjustments for implementation of the plan and a continuous improvement process. So you can see those factors listed up there. First and foremost is the data regarding the student. That's the student's needs, the student's strengths, and then the outcomes that we're seeing based on the plan that we're implementing. This includes the student's own input and voice as well, and multiple measures of skills and ability, not just at the beginning of the plan, but as the plan is measured via progress. And that is reported to the parents. The parents' voice and input is core to everything we do. This is one thing I especially love about being in the Sherwood School District is partnering with parents. We know that parents' engagement in this process is directly correlated with the outcome for students. And here in Sherwood, we have prioritized those relationships to make sure that their voice is at the center of what we do. And our parent partnership, just a little plug, if anyone else is listening at home, come join us for our first parent partnership this year, which is on the 27th next week, Wednesday evening. Right?
Yeah, 7 p.m. here at the district office.
Fantastic. And that's where we do sit down with parents and just really team with them individually and as a group, learning together about this process, helping each other navigate it and learning from each other so that we can grow. As you can see, there's a lot of detail that goes into this, and we really want our parents to both be informed and inform us in those situations. We also have all our staff input. Our staff is everyone from our instructional assistants, our general education teachers, to our specialists, such as our speech and language pathologists or occupational therapists, who are working together on this team to create a plan and then ensure that whatever we're doing is creating the change that we anticipated or wanted for the student. And they are, again, in Sherwood, I'm very thankful for our staff members. We saw just a couple of them, and I'll talk about in a few minutes who else is a part of those teams, and it is extensive. We have, say, 100 staff participating in these plans across the district. We also have those guiding or guideposts that we're always testing our plans against. So we have legal requirements and precedents that really guide our work and ensure that we are utilizing those best practices. And those are changing as case law is developed. We're paying attention and we're adjusting our practices to make sure that we're incorporating that guidance. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about the most recent legislative updates and what that is meaning for us. We also have disability culture. We know that disability culture shapes how we interact with any community of people in a specific disability area or otherwise, and it really also can inform those new legal requirements that we're seeing. For example, those legislative updates might focus on a current area of focus, such as dyslexia, which we've talked about previously, where 10 years ago or so, we might have been talking a lot more about autism. So disability culture is something we really need to pay attention to the nuances of what's up and coming, as well as our community's perspective. For example, the idea of neurodiversity or neural atypicality can be seen as either something that is a source of pride for an individual or something that some teams might approach as something to adjust. So we really need to pay attention to any disability culture's kind of opinion or thoughts about where we're falling and what kind of terminology is impacting us at that time. And those cultural nuances help us be allies and help us really team together to make sure the system is shifting to meet the needs of our community. We also, of course, want to stay on the current edge of research and evidence-based practices. As anyone in education will tell you, things don't stay the same. The one thing that we can predict is that we're always going to be continuing to grow and adjust as we learn more about learning. And special education is no different. And we're committed to that growth and growing together. And then, of course, we have our Oregon Department of Education Guidance and Requirements. The legal guidance that comes from the federal government or our legal support is also supported by the Oregon Department of Education, and they provide technical assistance to both ensure that we are meeting those needs and also providing feedback if somehow we are off track. If we were to be not meeting an expectation, they come alongside us and help us get there in a supportive way.
So Amy and I are fresh off of an ODE webinar. So we just talked about the Oregon Department of Education and some of those new requirements. The webinar that we just had the great pleasure of joining was regarding Senate Bill 819. And so this is probably the biggest in our special education world right now. All the directors are talking about it, superintendents are talking about it. Senate Bill 819 created new provisions to address abbreviated school days in school districts. What it did was it required a meaningful access provision. And so what that means is that students with disabilities can no longer unilaterally by a school district be placed on an abbreviated or partial school day.
And Erin, why would a student be placed on an abbreviated day in the first place?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons and it's really individualized. So a lot of the time, and the primary method that this happens in our school district is parent choice. So parents choose for a student to attend a separate program, therapy, or something else on a regular basis, and that's okay. We just have special reporting requirements now if that happens. Other times there are programs that a student may be a part of that best suits their needs, and it's offered in an abbreviated format. So due to transportation being longer, if it's an outside placement, some of those outside placements have chosen to have a somewhat abbreviated day, and it can only be by minutes, and it's still counted in that abbreviated school day report. Other reasons are that a student may not have the stamina yet. And so as an IEP team alongside parents, we may choose together to make a decision that a partial school day is what's best as a student builds stamina to attend school. So Senate Bill 819 calls on us to put measures in place to, if we do make that decision, which is an okay decision to make in cooperation with the parent, to put some systems in place to increase their time at school systematically or purposely. That helped answer. And so this is, it's a big deal because the law is pretty complex in its requirements and how we view or define abbreviated school days. So for example, I won't go into too much detail, but it can be an abbreviated school day is defined as either a partial day, so part of the school day time-wise, or completely separate activities and a lack of like access to recess, for example, or passing time. I can say that this is not a practice that we have generally in Sherwood, very, very specialized cases. And we saw it coming, I guess. They did prepare us pretty well. And for years, we really do strive to have every student access a full school day here in Sherwood. So then we have many other Senate bills, but we're just highlighting a few. Senate Bill 283 is creating some new provisions in the education workforce, specifically around pay differentials, and it doesn't require, but it kind of almost calls upon school districts to consider a pay differential for special education instructional assistants. Probably the most impactful change with this legislation is that as of next school year, staff who work at least 75% of their day in special education will be required to be at least 5-hour employees. And we've really tried to make that shift anyway for our employees. It does allow employees to choose to work fewer hours. So some of our, parents of students or other employees choose to work 4.5 hours or fewer than 5 hours during their day, and that's allowed. So that's when we're kind of watching and waiting to see, and I think we're pretty well prepared for that change and shift. Or getting closer to them. So we'll work with Steve on that. Check through all of our employees.
And one of the biggest shifts there is that in our contracts, when you move from 4 hours to 5 hours a day, the benefit structure changes substantially. And so as they become closer and closer to full time, the hourly wage goes up and you take the whole cost of the person. And so ultimately, we've been trying to move that direction anyway, because we want to have people stay long term, and that's how you get them to stay. But this will be a cliff, not a ramp for us. Go on that front.
Yeah. And right now, we have, for example, one full-time position, what we consider like a full school day position open, and many part-time, but we're trying to think of ways to have a conversation around what does that look like, and do we hire part-time any longer? Do we transition some of those? So we're just beginning those conversations as well. It is harder to hire for those part-time positions anyways. Senate bills 13 and 16. These are pretty simple ones, but it feels a little bit more impactful if you're a special educator. So it's a change in our language. They changed some of the terminology that we use. For example, emotional disturbance was an eligibility category in special education. It's now called emotional behavior disability. And so there's others, and communication disorder, speech language disability now. Is that right? Impairment. See, I'm still getting used to them too. So they're changing that, and that requires all of our forms to change that we use, all of our documents to change. And so there's some administrative implications for us, but also some learning for us as we navigate those conversations with families. The other thing is Senate Bill 16, it changed who can complete a medical statement. So for some of our disability categories, you're required to obtain a medical statement to substantiate the disability. For example, one of the eligibility categories is other health impairment. Obviously, we would need to hear from the medical professional what that other health impairment or what that health impairment is. And so now it broadens that to include like nurse practitioners and naturopaths, as well as physicians.
Add to these are celebratory changes. They were really made to remove barriers for families and students. So we're excited, and we're also just
about to say that.
Yeah.
These seem like really good shoes.
Yes, they are. So let's talk about Sherwood and what special education, or at least the data. And in special education, we love data. So this is like something we love to share, is just some of our numbers and percentages, and talk a little bit about them. So I pulled these numbers on September 11th. So this could have changed dramatically, or it could have not changed at all. I'm not sure. So as of that date, we had a total student enrollment of about 4,686. On that same day, we had, of those students, we had 587 students who were eligible for special education. So that's 12.5% of our student population in Sherwood has gone through that evaluation process, has gone through that planning process, and is currently receiving special education services. During that evaluation process, there's a stage of evaluation. It's called the referral stage. And so these are students who either a parent has referred them for special education and said, I have a concern, my student has a disability, and they have that conversation with the school. Or if we've gone through a number of interventions and we feel that a higher level of service is required. And so they're undergoing that evaluation process for special education to determine if they're eligible to receive services. So currently we have 30 students in that referral process. a lot of those students at the beginning of the school year will be students moving from out of state. So that's something just to know, that they come already eligible from another state, but when they come to Oregon, we have to look at that report and all of that testing and determine if they meet our state criteria. Because each state has a different criteria. It's very, very similar and almost entirely like transferable, but not always. There are some key differences that we look. We do have, when students are in referral, almost all of them become eligible for special education, not all of them, but if they go through our system of interventions and then we refer them, almost all of those students, we do find that they're eligible for special education. So we can look at that number and think, okay, so a good number of those students will become eligible for special education to increase our percentage here in Sherwood. This has grown. This is the highest percentage of special education students since I've been here. This is my eighth school year here in Sherwood.
Is it someone overseeing other districts around the state or?
I think we've seen a big surge since the pandemic, but I don't know. I don't know enough to know for sure if they've seen the same increasing trend.
The statewide average is 14%, but I don't know about the statewide differences in percentage for those years because we did all districts paused during the pandemic. And then referrals, there was that backload, but then there's also exiting that happens.
And then if we look at students eligible for Section 504, these are students who require accommodations in general education classrooms or in our school environment or activities, but they don't require separate instruction. And so 7.1% of our students are eligible for Section 504 services currently, which is 335 students. So altogether, that means that about 20% of our student population is a student with a disability who has been identified, who's gone through an evaluation process, and is receiving some sort of supports and services. That's 1 in 5 students. So this work, while we highlight, the key staff who support this work and the professionals who are designated to special education, really this work is for everybody in the school district. All of our general education teachers have students who are in special education or eligible for Section 504 in their classrooms. They're part of our community and we're really proud of that. And it comes with, attention that's needed to support those students and support those professionals so that, they can best serve all of their students. So looking at special education inclusion, each year or on every single individualized education plan or the IEP, we have to determine how much is a student in general education. And so that is then directly reported to the state. And we have one of the highest inclusion rates, just a trend throughout, since I've been aware of Sherwood School District, highest rates of inclusion in the state. So it's really great. There are districts who have a full inclusion model, and there are districts who have a lot of programs. And so there's a mix of inclusion around the state. But in Sherwood, 80% or more of the day in general education, we have 85.4% of our students in general education, 80% or more of their day. This is, I will let you know that this data for the next few lines is from the 2021-2022 school year. So they report it late. And so that's what we get to pull as a school district. I could pull current numbers, but this is what we really like to rely on is the state data that comes to us in our special education report card. That special education report card is available to the public as well on the ODE website. Less than 40% of the day in general education. So these are students who require the most significant supports and services in a separate environment for a variety of reasons. It might be due to medical needs. It might be due to behavioral needs. It might be due to executive functioning needs where they are working on some skills prior to joining the classroom more regularly. So 8.85% of our students fall into that category where they need more significant support for a greater part of their day. We have a great graduation rate. This is well above the state requirement and the state average for students with disabilities. It's 93%. And when you look at our graduating class of students with disabilities, it's not a huge graduating class. So you also have to think about that. Some years we're 100%, you know, some years we have a student or two who doesn't meet that 4-year graduation rate. One of the things we're most proud of though is our post-school outcomes data. So when we're talking about our values and we're focusing on building independence, this is where we see the outcome of that work. So our students who are engaged in either college, a trade, or employment, 81.25% of students who graduate out of our system are engaged, like either full-time, part-time, or enrolled in college. And that actually dropped in this data collection, and we were in the 90s. We were almost always in the 90s. So I think this definitely was an impact to because of the pandemic and because of, you know, job shortages for a while. Hopefully we'll see a rise again as jobs became more available. But we do have targeted programs and a targeted implementation of just services across the board to help to ensure that people who graduate from our system are engaged. So.
We talked a little bit about who does this work and what those members of any given team may be. As a department, we are made up of over 100 staff members of specialists who work together to ensure our students have what they need on any given day. You can just look over that list of titles. If you don't know who any of these people are in our district or our buildings or have questions about what their roles are, I encourage you to bring that up during our questions section at the end. But you will note that our special education instructional assistant numbers are very high. That's really those number of people who are in our classrooms supporting our high inclusion model. We have learning specialists at every building, multiple at buildings who need it. We also have really specific and specialized supports, such as our American Sign Language assistants and our autism specialists who we contract with our local education service districts to bring in that specific level of support. Don't know what any of those people do.
Even as we were typing this, we're like, oh, but what about that person? They also helped, and we're like, okay, we get it.
It's a lot of sense.
Keep it focused, yeah.
So we've talked about the continuum of services. We've seen some of our services in action, and really we just wanted to highlight what that continuum looks like and really emphasize, as you've seen in our values and in our numbers, that least restrictive environment is one of our core features and core focuses. It's also that legal requirement as well as best practice. So when a team comes together and they've created a plan for a student, we as a district are required to have a continuum of placement options in which to deliver or implement that plan. We have everything from the least restrictive, which is the general education classroom at the school, the neighborhood school, where the student would naturally attend, to a special education classroom, which can be a separate classroom within their neighborhood school for part of the day or for more of their day, to a separate school or a special school. Our special schools that we utilize for students who need that level of support are not in our district in Sherwood. Some larger districts, let's say, for example, Beaverton covers a large area and they do have special schools within their district. However, we contract with local special schools outside of our district to meet the needs of those students. But it is significantly more restrictive to send a student outside of your local district. Then there are sometimes students who are homebound or require hospital or residential facilities. These are students who are highly impacted by medical needs and hopefully for a short period of time before they're ready to return to our district. And we do have students across the spectrum of services at any given time, but we're always looking and gathering that data to adjust and return them to a less restrictive option. We're required to review that placement at least once a year, but as a district, We're taking constant data and really doing this on a progress cycle. So it's not something that we forget about and don't talk about. It's something that we're really focused on. And we've been really thankful over the past 2 years to return the huge majority of our students who are accessing outside of special school placements to our district. And that is a celebration that we do.
So we have a lot to celebrate. There's been a lot of really exciting things that have been accomplished in the last several years in Sherwood with special education. And so we want to just talk a little bit about what those are. One of the things that we're most proud of is our parent partnership meetings. So Amy mentioned those a little bit earlier in our presentation. We hold those meetings monthly. And we've alternated time so that they're accessible to parents who might work in the evening or in the morning. And we alternate with an evening meeting, an after school meeting, right after school, like 4:30, and then a morning meeting as well. And so we hold those meetings monthly. You'll also see these published in our school newsletters the week before. So you'll get that little reminder. And then you'll see it in the district newsletter as well. So this was on our social media page, so you might have seen it there. This flyer that is up on the slide. We would love for any parent who is interested, who has a student with a disability or wants to learn about special education or Section 504, just build a community of parents with similar interests to come to this meeting. I think it's really helped us to build partnerships where they didn't exist previously. So parents may have felt like they had questions and they didn't have a relationship or a name or a face to put, that question to. So that is, so this has solved that. And we've been able to really build some really great connections and partnerships with parents, and we hope to continue to do that. We typically, have a balance between parent chosen topics that we do a little bit of like learning around or presenting around. And then we also present some advocacy opportunities because parents with disabilities are some of the best advocates out there. And then we also do kind of like an instructional component where we learn we display, like, for example, we'll prepare binders next week where we can keep our IEPs or our eligibility paperwork. And so we'll walk through that with parents. We also use this group to inform us. So that's something that's been really important, and it's informed some of the practices that we've implemented in our school district. So just really valuable, huge celebration. And we hold those once a month, and would love for anybody to attend that if you'd like to. We were very fortunate. The federal government implemented an equipment and supplies grant for the 2022-2023 school year. And we were able to do a full curriculum adoption, and you've heard about those adoptions last year in the spring. We went through a piloting process. We went through, just a really thoughtful implementation process, which will inform our goals, which I'll talk about next. Some of these are to address our dyslexia concerns that some of our parents brought to us with bringing in the science of reading and really being purposeful and systematic about our reading instruction. We have a math component. We have a social emotional learning component for students who might have a behavioral goal on their IEP or emotional regulation goal on their IEP. So it's just been huge, and we're fully invested in the implementation and professional development now of our curriculum adoption. The independence building process has been really great. We have students throughout the district who require adult support within our schools. And so this process has really helped us to hone in on what areas does the student require support for, and how can we help that student to really gain independence through thoughtful instruction and support throughout their day. And so really being purposeful about how we're assigning adult support, how we're looking at our data, and how we're having those conversations was a huge area of growth for us last year. And we're still implementing that, but it was a primary goal, and we've made a ton of progress. So You've obviously heard about standards-based grading. And so in the world of special education, we're also working on standards-based modified grading. So some students are not able to meet the standard at the level that we have set for a goal in that general education classroom. And there's two ways we can navigate it for those students. We can either adjust our expectation on the scale and say we would like to achieve a level 2 for mastery for this student in this content area, or we can change the standard. And so sometimes we'll have like a 10th grade standard in science, but we'll have a similar thread of standards at a 3rd grade level for that student who's working on beginning reading skills or beginning writing skills due to their disability. And so we're really working on training this out. We're piloting it right now, and it's really exciting work. There's a technical component to it. There's that adaptive work where we work with teachers around how do we implement modified instruction and how do we grade students in a modified manner using our standards-based practices. Ultimately, I think it will make doing grading for students who receive modifications a lot easier in the long run. We're not there yet, but we will be.
So the goal is to get those rubrics to the teachers to go in that grade? Is that the goal?
It's a partnership. So it's a partnership between the learning specialist or special education teacher and that general education teacher. So the responsibility really lies on both of them to get to work together, which is the best way to do it. Right now we have special educators who are kind of developing the system and trying it out with gen ed teachers. So it's not like an additional standards-based grading ask of gen ed teachers yet. We're kind of just developing some systems that might work and then saying, hey, let's try this with the student. Yeah.
Can I piggyback on that question? Yeah. So I did have a parent ask me this just this week, who develops the modification? So if my child is on an IEP, but they're in a classroom, is it their IA who's developing the modification? Is it the teacher? Is it your staff that gives it to the IA? And I was like, I don't answer that question. And I'm like, let me ask, let me find out.
Yeah, it's really a collaborative effort. So we do have some instructional assistants who, under the direction and supervision of the special ed teacher and the general ed teacher, are delivering modifications. But primarily it's the responsibility of the special ed teacher and the gen ed teacher together.
So not as much the IA.
Yeah, they're not, well, they can develop materials and stuff, but all of the work that the instructional assistants do should be under, like, guided by that special education teacher.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It is a collaborative effort though. We have some amazing instructional assistants who are just so skilled and honestly know that content area better than we do as learning specialists, you know, and so we really do need to listen to them when they're like, no, we should modify in this way. So that's how it's a really collaborative conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then we've been so fortunate. I mean, every district in Oregon in the nation is just really struggling. People don't have special education teachers. They have openings in their school district. They have many openings for instructional assistants. And we, like I said, we have one open instructional assistant position right now. That's a full-time position. And so our staff stay. You know, we do have a little bit higher turnover in special education because sometimes we have young people join us and they're trying out or they go on to a career or they're in school, for example. And so it's a little bit higher in our field, but really our retention of really skilled trained staff is remarkable compared to other districts across the nation.
Can I just piggyback on that? Can you, just for everybody listening at home, what's the difference between a learning specialist and an instructional assistant for STEM department? Just so we people are interested and you can kind of make a plug a little bit, but obviously some difference.
Yeah, so a learning specialist is a special education teacher. So they have a teaching license, similar to what a general education teacher would have, but they've specialized in you know, direct instruction approach and serving students with disabilities. A lot of teachers are now dual endorsed, which is really cool. So they'll get a gen ed license and they'll also get a special ed license, which is really great. And it helps us with, you know, maintaining a skilled workforce in our district. Instructional assistants are classified staff members. So we require training for them and support for them, but they don't hold a teaching license. One of the things we're proud of though, is that many of our instructional assistants choose to go down that path. And we have a lot of former instructional assistants who are now teachers. So, yeah, it's really cool. We were like, oh, we need you, everybody come on up, we'll help support you. And we have really supportive teachers and administrators in our buildings who help with that kind of grow your own process for SPED staff. And one thing that I think Amy and I are really proud of is that we really do want to learn and get better, and we try and approach this work as learners. You know, we will never have it completely right, but we can look at all of the input that we receive from our community, from our parent partners, for individual students, from our students, and we want to learn from that and we want to get better. And so that is definitely something to celebrate. We try and have that kind of growth mindset with our staff too. In fact, somebody asked me today, we have a new requirement that requires drafts of IEPs to go out to parents in advance. And somebody said, well, what if I don't get it right? You know, what if I don't do that? And I was like, well, I'm not going to like get mad at you. It's just there are circumstances where we have a spike in our workload. Let's just talk through that. How can we support you with that? You know, eventually I think we can get there. I just need to know how I can support you. And so really just focusing on how can we work together to get better and better at what we do. And that leads us to some of our areas of work. So a couple of years ago, we did some surveying, and then we continued that into last year, where we really got input from a variety of stakeholders on like, where can we get better? Where can we get better, and where are we doing a good job? And these are kind of the three pillars of work that we've honed in on and fine-tuned for this school year. And they're kind of a carryover from last school year. So of primary importance is our culture and climate. Special education is hard work. No, never once have I ever had a perfect day. And in my special education classroom, when I was a teacher or as an administrator or supporting buildings. And so that is hard. It's hard work for staff. So by having a really positive culture where we're able to learn together, make mistakes together, and just really approach this work with, you know, kindness for each other and support, that helps us just to retain our staff and to do our best for students and have the right mindset for serving them. So we're working, Amy and I, constantly on our vision and messaging, like how are we able to recruit parents for our parent partnerships? How are we able to share our vision for the work that we do to best support students? Always working on better ways to build those parent partnerships, both within that meeting, but also like one-on-one for IEP meetings. How do we gain input in advance to inform our IEPs? So lots of little ways we're working on those parent partnerships, and that's the primary goal. And then, like I kind of alluded to, we really want to work on a collaborative structure of support. So there's not one person who can best serve a student. It's a community of people in our schools and a team and teams in our schools who can do that. We have a lot of processes and systems within special education because there are a lot of legal requirements. There's a lot of compliance requirements. And so we're always trying to find better ways to do that so that it's efficient, so that it's doable, because there are many responsibilities that special educators have. And how can we streamline it and update it to meet the requirements of the law? Of course, this also applies to our mental health systems. We're really building that ship still. With our SIA dollars came some staffing, and that could be a whole separate presentation. So we're not going to talk about that too much, but for health services, Section 504 systems, we're always looking to improve those, update those, and make sure that they are in tip-top shape. And then finally, of course, we're an instructional unit. We're part of the teaching and learning department in student services. And this is really the work that we do, is we help students learn. And so curriculum assessment and instruction is really one of our core values or core tenets that we want to work on in special ed. And that includes instructional coaching from our special ed coordinators, but from Amy and I as well, as we go into buildings and support teams. our assessment practices. So going into those professional learning communities and talking about what does our data look like? What are we doing with students who are not learning and growing? How can we better support those students? And what do we do when students have already learned that? And how can we help move them on and keep making progress with those students? And of course, standards-based modified grading. So that's just kind of a glimpse of some of the pockets of work that we have going on. For the staff that Amy and I supervise, we do ask them to align one of their professional goals to one of these 3 tenets, at least. They can do more than that, but we do ask them to do that, and we support them in that process of goal development. Our goals as well are reflected within that. The last thing I want to say about this is we really wanted to align these with our district instructional plan and our teaching and learning goals as well. So this does overlap nicely with the school goals. It's not going to be something separate from those, but it's going to overlap nicely with the school goals and the district goals. And with that, we're ready for questions.
I actually have a question for you guys, but I just wanted you to know, I mean, I know it's hard to kind of sit up here and just give a long presentation and neatly tie up everything you do in your day. So thank you for attempting to do that. That's really hard. But I have to say, I mean, I left yesterday and I've met you both several times, but never spent much time around you. And when I left, I just thought, gosh, like you both come across as so highly educated and so joyful in the work that you do, such a partnership, and just seeing you interact with other staff and students, like it's evident that you really have a passion for working with special ed students. So I know I left feeling like, oh my gosh, like we have such a tremendous department right here. It was such a blessing to come in and see the newer classrooms and see the work you guys were doing. And so, I mean, I appreciate you guys taking this time to come here, to put this together, to come and talk to us, answer questions. It helps. A lot of us we don't have that experience or access to see what that really looks like for you guys. And it helps when people come to us with questions, we mostly don't have answers. And so it's at least nice to be able to say, this is some experience we've had or conversations we've had, or things we've seen. And so we really appreciate it.
And we really want to be accessible. I think that's something that both Amy and I feel really strongly about is, you know, any questions parents have, we reserve time, or we will, you know, make sure we have time to answer questions or have that conversation or hear that concern. So something that's really important.
It feels that way.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have questions?
My question, I was just gonna echo what Abby said, and when I walked away from yesterday, my first thought was like, I wish everyone was able to just see what I just saw. Because it's hard to describe, because you go to so many different locations and you get to see like all this amazing intervention work and how it's spread out and it's integrated, and it was just so cool. And I finally figured out what happens at that old district office, you know, and I was like, incredible. It was Independence Academy, right? And so I was like, yes, I wish that we were like in a fishbowl for people to see. And you guys clearly look like you work very well together. It seems like a very like cohesive relationship there, and your office was adorable, I thought. And it was my own first good classroom. So
For that.
Yeah. But I
tip top too.
Yeah, it looked good. It looked really good. So I appreciate it. It was fantastic.
I had a lot of fun. Say how much that meant to our staff and students to see your faces as well. It was really meaningful, and they felt seen and attended to, and really appreciated it. Yes.
You both had questions.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I mean, so in my previous life, I was a gen ed teacher for 17 years. And so I knew a lot of this terminology, you know, 504 IEP and a lot of IEPs. But I have to say, even having worked in Sherwood, half the stuff that you guys showed me yesterday, I had no idea. I didn't know. And I would actually encourage you know, everybody here is to maybe educate teachers a bit more. I'm sure I wasn't the only teacher that taught for 17 years and didn't know half the stuff. You know, there's a lot that goes on. And I think it would be useful. Just even from the side of empathy and understanding, right? Because most of the time, like in an, you know, get a interaction with a 504 plan or something, it's usually because I screwed up right?
Mhm.
Parents have. I'm like, okay, great, what am I supposed to do? You gotta, but you know, having that bigger vision of what's going on, is really useful. I mean, it doesn't have to be this extensive of a training, but even just, you know, getting out and seeing something once in a while. I know, add more lists to the plate of things to do, but I think it's useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, I appreciate it.
Right, you're up on.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said. This is like a double whammy. In the sense that this presentation, which people can see. Does not do justice to what we saw. That's been said, and. I had no idea much of the stuff that was going. Behind the scenes, it's under the radar, and the dedication of the folks. The passion of the folks that are doing the work that we saw and interacted with. As well as the team that's leading them. I was so impressed by you two. And we didn't get to see 4 of the other team members because they were filling in. And I got an appreciation of how fluid and really how you maneuver with a lot of flexibility. But the leadership at the top seemed to be just riding a wave. And this is really great. And I agree, I don't know how we can let people in the community know about some of these things that are happening that we saw yesterday, but maybe we'll figure something out. I had one clarification for y'all. What is an example of student needing adult support?
Yes.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
It can mean a lot of things. So some students, we primarily assign adult support, or the IEP team determines that's required if it's needed for safety. And so if we have a student who might elope a lot, or they leave the building or program, you're gonna need to have some adult support for that. We can always make progress towards not eloping and staying in the classroom. There's skills there. Other students require toileting support or
Okay.
feeding support or transition support, you know, and we like to start, if we suspect a student needs adult support, we like to start with a temporary adult support in place, and then we can see and do some data collection around when is the student really requiring, and when are they independent? That's for a lot of different
Can you define the local? Because
things.
general society needs something else.
I open and I was like, wait, we don't use that word.
I know.
And when a student leaves the classroom or the designated space, and usually repeatedly, so it's a behavioral term
Yes.
where we want them to stay there and they're not staying there.
They're not falling in love and leaving.
No. They're taking off. Taking a part with them. Yeah.
And Hans, I'm not, a specialist, but I would say to answer your question, I think that really is the point of us getting to go on this field trip, is that we are a conduit to our community, and they come to us and they ask, and we had this really incredible experience that isn't realistic for everybody in the community to experience. And so we now get to take that back and share that and say, this is what it was like to experience it. This is what it was like to see this apartment that was created, or these kids sorting through, computer materials and recycling them and working in the print. I mean, it was really powerful to watch all those kids, or the middle school kids that were truly learning. Like, those are tangible things that we can go back and discuss. I've already shared it with so many of my close friends, just because it was so impactful to get to be there and see it. And so I think that's what you can do, and I think that builds a sense of confidence in this community as well, that this is being handled so well.
Yeah, and join our parent partnership meeting.
Yeah.
I think that's another avenue for anybody who would like to learn about our programs, because you can ask questions, but we also share information. And I think that people have felt closer to what the work we're actually doing by joining that group.
And hearing from each other.
Yeah.
Christine needs to pivot.
Yes, I know. It's time.
I was just gonna say, we do have to wrap up, so
Thank
we
you so
will
much.
close out our work session and return here at 7 o'clock. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
And
Can I
we
get
rest on the top. Oh, no, my God. And everything. Progress.